Hey everyone, welcome back to Shop Life. In today's video, we're going to be installing an oil catch can on this 135i that came with an N55 engine. So we've been doing a lot of track modifications to this car to get it, track ready, as well as just tune it a little more and get more power out of it. We've done a walnut blast and all of that. The N55s aren't, as susceptible to the carbon buildup as opposed to the N54, which gets a lot of carbon buildup. But the oil catch can help out pretty much any vehicle just because it'll try to capture as much of the blow-by instead of letting it go back through the intake. So the whole reason you would want to put an oil catch can, like I said, is to catch all of that extra blow-by that's going through the intake system. That way it doesn't coat your whole intake, your intake valves. And this is more specific to the direct injection engines like that of the N54, N55, mainly because there is no fuel going over those intake valves to clean them up, as opposed to the M54 and previous generation engines. So direct injections, the gas is directly injected, just like how the name is, as opposed to port injection, which the fuel goes over all the intake valves and keeps them clean. So that carbon buildup over the intake valves over time will cause you to have misfires, rough idle, and stuff like that. So I would definitely install an oil catch can, especially as soon as you've cleaned all of your intake valves by doing like a walnut blast or something of that sort. The oil catch can that we're going to be using is this Mishimoto Direct Fit N55, and it comes with a bracket that uses a factory bolt hole already, and you literally just bolt this straight to the bracket. So you only have to reuse the bolt that is already on the car, and then they give you these 3 bolts to attach to the bracket. They also give you these 2 fittings as well as the hoses that go to each. So let me go and show you what we have here. So I would definitely go and watch my intake manifold removal video for this specific car. We'll have it linked down below, and it'll show you how to get to this point right here. We've got the whole airbox removed, the cowl that goes with the airbox, as well as the rear and forward engine covers. Both of those are out. That way we have more access to this. Also the microfilter housing and both of the strut bars are out. You don't have to remove the strut bars, but you will want to remove this microfilter, cabin filter assembly. That way you have access to remove these 2 covers as well. So just go watch that video, and once you're at this point, then we can continue. So this bracket right here is gonna go over right where this expansion tank bolt is. So you would just take this bolt off, slide this bracket underneath, and then put the 10mm bolt right there. And then on your catch can, they're probably going to include these fittings separately. So make sure you go ahead and tighten them down. There's O-rings on each of the fittings, and make sure you lube the O-rings with some kind of silicone spray. That way they, ease into there without tearing up. And you also want to go ahead and clean the whole catch can out. So it just comes apart by unscrewing it from the bottom. So just clean all of this out. There shouldn't be really any dirt in there, but just in case from during assembly, if there's any metal burrs or anything left, it's a good idea to clean everything up. Also clean the ports for the in and out as well. The whole idea of the Mishimoto catch can system is to reuse this oil separator hose, mainly because it does have this electrical connector in it, which keeps the pipe heated, that way nothing really freezes over. And a lot of systems will just eliminate this completely and just leave this connector dangling down there, but that will throw an error code. It might not throw a check engine light per se, but if you were to scan it with like a BMW specific scanner, you are going to have an error code for it. And one thing that I do recommend is to make sure you have a new one of these pipes before you start retrofitting this oil catch can, just because sometimes these things are brittle, and when we go to remove this little plastic section right here, the connector itself might also break. Alright, so what we're going to do first, we're going to remove this bolt and secure this catch can here, and then we'll start messing around with this hose. So in order to attach this bracket, you do have to remove this 10mm bolt on the expansion tank. With that out of the way, you can slide this underneath. So you can loosen this top 10mm bolt as well to help you move the expansion tank around. Get this lined up. Now there's 3 bolts that are attached to the top of the catch can, and these are hex bolts. You can use a 2.5 size Allen key. And it's going to remove these all the way. And now you can slide this from underneath the bracket. And it should slide. This circle section that says Mishimoto slides into the actual opening. And it should sit pretty flush. And you just want to screw in each one of these bolts. Alright, so now we've got the catch can mounted. It's pretty solid in there. There's not going to be much weight on here. We're just going to have the two hoses that attach to this now. And you should still have enough access to unscrew this, because you do want to check the catch can every, let's say, 1,000 to 1,500 miles, or even every time you fill up gas, and just empty it, because once it starts filling up all the way, then you're just going to run all of that, you know, all of whatever's collected back in through the intake. Alright, so now with this secured, we can continue removing this hose. So first we're going to unhook this connector. So the connector, you have to lift up the tab right here on the actual hose itself, and then you pull out the connector. Now we have these two screws holding this pipe in. I believe this one is an aftermarket screw. They both should be Torx, but this one right here we have is a Phillips. Yeah, that's definitely an aftermarket screw. And this one right here is a T25. And now on this section, you just have these 4 tabs. Now for these tabs, you can use your finger or a flathead and just gently lift them up. So you have one tab on the bottom, which you can't really see, but you can feel it with your flathead, and you have these 3 up here. Now you can just twist this section and lift up and out. There is an O-ring that secures it to that intake pipe, as well as an O-ring that secures it to the valve cover. Here are the 2 hoses that we're going to be using that are included with the Mishimoto kit. So one end of the hose goes to the actual catch can, and the other end goes to one of these connectors. So in order to release the connectors, we are going to have to cut off this plastic end off of both sides. So you're going to need a blade. You just want to carefully put a slice right through one end of this hose. You'll feel it go all the way through, and you see how it's separated, and then you can just slide it right off. Same thing on this side. You can see how this one's already starting to leak oil around the edges. Now we can secure these connectors back into their spots. That way we can route these hoses properly and get them secured on these connectors. So we'll start out with this one. Just twist it until it falls into its spot. So both of these screws should be a T25. I replaced the Phillips one with the T20 one that I had. That's the same thread, and that's the closest thing I had. Alright, so we do not reuse this connector. The hose that Mishimoto provides actually goes over this barb section on the valve cover itself. And Mishimoto does not provide any hose clamps, and technically you shouldn't really need them because it is really tight fit on there. But for peace of mind, you could add some hose clamps if you like. Now let's see how we're supposed to route these hoses. So you have this long hose that curves all the way around. This one goes to the closest section towards the expansion tank. So this connector right here. The 90-degree section, the smaller end, goes on that. You can slide it in. You can use some silicone spray if you having trouble put it on. And then you want to route it all the way around, go underneath this intake hose. And then we're going to go right onto this connector, and you should be able to just slide it right on. And you can see this still has enough space to put the whole air box and everything back on without any issues. And you could technically route it underneath this hose that goes to the high pressure fuel pump. Now for this hose, I think they left an extra little bit of length on here. We can trim it to, you know, however we need it. So first we're just gonna slide it on this. And then let's see how it does if we just leave the whole length on there. Yeah, it's definitely way too long. You can see how it's starting to kink right here as well. And you can see how it's not really sitting perfectly straight on here. So we're just gonna cut some of this length right here and see how it does. So we're just gonna cut off about 1 inch. Let's see how it does and if we need to cut off any more. I feel like the whole issue here is this section is a little too long. What we could possibly even do is turn this bracket some more and give us a little bit more space. Yeah, so now it fits a lot better. It's nice and snug. Everything is still hooked up as it should be. We can go ahead and plug in this connector on the bottom. All right. Now, like I said before, one thing that you can add to this whole setup will be hose clamps. So just get like a variety pack of hose clamps and just hook them up directly depending on what size you need. Main spot I would put them would be right here at the catch can itself, because that's not, I mean, it's snug, but it could use a little bit of, you know, a fastener just to keep it nice and tight on there. Right here is really tight, so there's no need for a hose clamp there. Same with this fitting, and I'm not sure if you did put a hose clamp if it would be, you know, enough for you to put the cover and everything back on. So let's try to put the covers on and see how it does. And if we need to, we can move this hose underneath this and figure out a way to route it. That way it doesn't, you know, push this high pressure fuel pump line up at all. So I did end up having to route this hose underneath this high pressure fuel pump line. That way it would fit underneath this cover. If you don't do it that way, then you have to set this on top of the cover. And if you do that, then the other top front cover will not fit. So one thing I just don't like about this, you can see how it raises up this line a little bit and it doesn't sit in the groove where it's supposed to on the valve cover. And another thing I don't like is how these hoses are getting squished right here, which, I mean, there's not much else we can do about it if we do want to use this direct fit system and to reutilize those connectors. So one thing that we could possibly do would be to rotate this, you know, the other way, rotate it about 180 degrees. But if we did that, then this connector will probably hit the valve cover. That wouldn't work either. So, I mean, I understand why Mishimoto did it like this. There's not really much other possibilities unless we just ditch this whole connector setup right here and figure out something else. But for utilizing the whole stock connectors and everything, I think this is as good as we're going to be able to get it. Let's go ahead and put this front cover on and show you guys how it looks. So another issue we're running into is this hose right here, how it's hitting or it's kinking against this front cover. So a way to remedy that is you can cut the front cover, and when you cut it, that'll leave more space for this hose to actually go around without getting kinked. I'm gonna ask the owner of the car what he wants me to do. If it was your car, it's up to you. You can leave the cover off or cut it, that way there's enough space. So it is direct fit to an extent. I mean, yeah, there's a few things that you would have to modify, but hey, I mean, if you want to reutilize all the stock stuff, that's something that you're gonna have to sacrifice. But for the most part, that pretty much concludes this DIY. Like I said, get some hose clamps if you want. I would definitely get the hose clamps for the catch can connectors. And that just recorded me checking it. Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
Mine's better.
Yeah. At least you have a dipstick. That should have put a dipstick on here. But you know how easy it is just to freaking drop the can and spill everything? How the fuck you get the can out?
So if you don't have skinny hands like him, I don't know.
You're kind of screwed.
You have to take off the hoses.
Or you just take off the bracket from right here, or you take off these three, and then lift the whole thing up. That's a lot of work. I might have to make a video for my alternative to this, using a $30 Amazon catch can. This is $200.
That's $200?
Yeah. They should have at least put a dipstick, for real. I know there's a drain port at the bottom where you could set it to like a remote drain, but then what's the point of that? Like, you're trying to get something that's direct fit. And besides that, the rest of this reassembly, you can go watch that rest of the intake removal video. It shows you how to reassemble everything else. We still need to have all this stuff off because we're doing other work to the car. But besides that, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below or go to my website. Check that out, ask a question there, do whatever you need to do. Thanks for watching. Make sure you go check out all of our other social media and stuff, and stay tuned for the next video.